We've just listened to a very we've just listened to a very scintillating presentation by our national president, most of which just flew over my head because it's so out of the world presentation. My topic today is more of a general nature and very down to earth. So, I would like to say a few words on Jyotisha as a science. Though one of the oldest sciences known to mankind, in terms of explored potential, Jyotisha is still very much in its infancy. This is only because of an obstinate, even foolhardy resistance to bringing in astrology into the educational curriculum. There is, in other words, an unholy opposition to universities offering courses in Jyotisha. Universities are meant to teach you to think logically, and those who oppose astrology, these universities, which should be learning, are guilty of illogical thinking, bias, and prejudice, which blunt the rational in the human intellect. The only argument of those opposing astrology, and which is based on shocking ignorance of even the basics of Jyotisha, is that it is not science. Worse, there is a tendency to brand it as superstition. This argument is tragic and pathetic, reflecting on the lack of scientific temper of those who call themselves rationalists, which term usually includes some officially designated scientists and some self-styled vicharavadis. Before condemning astrology as not science, one should know what science is. Science, in its simplest form, is systematized knowledge. If that be so, Jyotisha is indeed science with its systematically structured and organized body of knowledge. What characterizes science? In school, we are taught it is observation, experiment, inference, and verification. The details of which I'm sure all of you would have learnt in school. Jyotisha answers this fourfold criteria very well. Now, what distinguishes science from superstition? Science is objective, while superstition is subjective. Yet another criterion of science is the test of replication. On this count also, astrology qualifies as a science. Only if astrology is properly understood and approached. Now, what is this test of replication? We all know an experiment in science produces a certain result. According to the test of replication, no matter who does the experiment and wherever it is done, the results should be the same under the same controlled conditions. For examples, we all know G equals acceleration due to gravity equals 32 feet per second squared. So let us assume you do this experiment not in the laboratory, but on the terrace or a balcony of a building. Drop a wad of cotton wool from the balcony or even the terrace. What happens? The cotton wad does not hit the ground at 32 feet per second squared. It may not even land on the ground. It may get wafted and land on the branch of a tree. Does this mean G is not equal to 32 feet per second squared? That cannot be. But what happens is when we drop the cotton wad from the terrace or the balcony, the control conditions of the laboratory are not present. There are other conditions too, such as the breeze or heavy winds, heavy humidity, dust in the atmosphere, all of which tend to alter the speed of the cotton wool as it is dropped. So when the control condition of the lab are altered, the value of D is also altered. Likewise in astrology too. Take 100 charts with a specific combination carrying specific results as given in classical works. You will find it will be working in 100% of the cases if all the conditions of the combination are fulfilled, which is excellent proof of astrology passing the test of replication. However, if you find it does not work in all the cases, but only in a few of the cases, it is not that the combination does not work, it is because other planetary factors influencing the combination alter the results. In science too, the results of the acceleration due to gravity experiment obtained under the controlled conditions of the laboratory do not obtain when these conditions change. Likewise, in Jyotisha too, when a specific combination is influenced by other factors, the results too can change. So there are hundreds of combinations on which anyone can experiment and find out for themselves. When science, or rather scientists, say astrology cannot be proved by its laws, by scientific laws, we must point out that astrology should be proved by astrological methods. Just as you cannot prove, okay, just as you cannot prove laws of physics in a chemistry lab, or you cannot prove laws of chemistry through physics or higher physics, just as you cannot prove botany laws in a physics lab, so also astrology cannot be proved by the laws of either physics or laws of chemistry or demonstrated by the methods of chemistry. So, astrology can be proved likewise only through the methods of Jyotisha. If this simple logic is not understood by those who condemn Jyotisha, I can only quote the Right Honorable Srinivas Shastri of the pre-independence days, who, arguing the case before the courts, told the British judge, quote, Your Honor, I can only give you the arguments for my case, but I cannot give you the brains to understand the arguments. So it is with those who denigrate Jyotisha. My experience with rationalists has been very interesting, and I would like to share one or two instances if our Honorable President gives me permission to do so. See, unless the astrological community opposes professionals from other fields arrogating to themselves the role of certifying authorities on Jyotisha, people would be continue to be misled by misconceptions on the subject. And I also bemoan the tendency among certain astrologers to publicize wrong predictions of fellow astrologers under the mistaken notion they are being objective. Such activity shows a lack of solidarity in the astrology community and needs to be discouraged. Wrong predictions are not unique to astrology. All other sciences have their share of failures and worse with graver consequence than the astrological. I can list several failures by the space department, medicos, lawyers, and other professionals. Why is it that no other professional betrays his tribe except the astrological? This kind of self whipping in public must stop, but that does not mean we need not academically review and re examine failed forecasts. In the present scenario of the anti-astrology brigade, we must remember offense is the best form of defense. In 2019, that is when the last general elections were held, there was a challenge thrown by a Mangalore-based chemistry professor, challenging astrologers to predict the exact number of seats of those winning the elections. And then he said he would offer a prize of 1,50,000 to whoever made the correct prediction. And some of the local astrologers, they were so, diffident, and they said, we can't make such predictions, it's so difficult, we don't have all the data we need and all that. They kept talking amongst themselves. So I wrote to the professor and said, it's very interesting, but just as you have set conditions, we also have our conditions as astrologers. And I said, in the first place, please deposit the prize money of 1,50,000 in a bank account. Secondly, please provide us with the birth data of all the candidates filing the elections. Secondly, please provide affidavits from all those fighting the elections saying that the birth data that they have provided is correct and accurate. After we get all this information from you, we should proceed with our research and predicting of the number of seats each party will win and so on. And I also said, in the event of our predictions working out, and of course a team will be needed to work out so many charts and make predictions. So we need to cover the expenses of the team. You will have to make provision for that. After that, there was no word from him. And in 2024 elections, I think there was no challenge coming from anyone after that. In another case, a rationalist, Hamid Dabolkar, from Pune, he challenged astrologers saying, if astrology is science, then you should be able to make predictions for those born in Mars also. So I said, I can take up the challenge, but again I have to set my conditions also. Number one, and he offered a prize money as usual. And not only that, he said, each person who wants to take up this challenge should pay a deposit of 50,000. So I told him, we also have our conditions. Please deposit the prize money in a bank account because we should be sure you have the amount with you. Then I said, secondly, I can take up the case of predicting horoscopes for a birth on the planet Mars, but you will have to provide me with certain data. I said, please provide me the date on Mars when the birth takes place. Also, the latitude and longitude of the place on Mars. And also, first of all, there should be a maternity home on Mars. Once that comes up and a baby is born there, you note the time not about, as per IST but as Mars Standard Time, and then give me the data, and I will proceed with accepting your challenge. Naturally, here also there was no response, and the challenge is also stopped. So it is very unfortunate. People from a point of total ignorance that condemn astrology believing they are great intellectuals. Even many great intellectuals for that matter. Whenever they know I am into astrology, They ask me, can you tell me my astrology? What is my astrology and what is this? What has that to do with astrology? There's so much ignorance rampant in those who criticize Jyotisha. So we will set that aside for the time being. So if anybody makes a challenge, you please set your conditions. You don't have to accept defeat. Just as they set conditions, we can also set our terms and conditions. So that is about anti-astrology groups. Now it is very important for freshers present here to know what is astrology and its content. All ancient classical works on Indian astronomy are very clear on what constitutes Jyotisha. Siddhanta Samhita Hora Rupam Skandatrayatmakam Vedasya Nirmalam Chakshuhu Jyotishastram Manuttamam. Jyotisha has three skandhas or branches. One is Siddhanta, which comprises of Ganita, mathematics, and Gola or spherical astronomy. That is, for working out the planetary positions and other astronomical phenomena to make use of in making forecasts. The second branch is Samhita. It relates to the planetary positions and their correspondence with anything that affects collective destinies and large geographical tracts. And events like national and international developments, natural calamities, agriculture, weather, rainfall, wars, migrations, terrorist acts, public health, stocks and shares, anything that applies to large groups of people. The last branch of Jyotisha is Hora, which is the Palabhaga, and it is subdivided into three branches: Jataka, based on birth time; Prashna, based on question time; and Muhurta, where a point of time is identified as good or bad based on planetary factors. Another point I would like to emphasize is when people ask, how can planets influence man? We should point out their question itself is irrelevant and smacks of total ignorance of even the definition of Jyotisha. Now, according to Brihat Parashara Hora Shastra, the most authoritative work on Jyotisha, it is in the form of a dialogue between the disciple Maitreya and the Guru Parashara. Maitreya is asking his Guru, Katamasya hi Vishwasya Prabhavottalayo Bhavet Nabhastayi Grahanancha Bhumistha Pranina Mitaha. Maitreya is asking, how does creation and dissolution of the universe take place? What is the connection between celestial bodies orbiting the skies, Nabhastayi Grahanancha, and life forms on earth? Bhumistha Praninam Mitaha. This question is followed by Parashara's exposition of predictive astrology, that is, the connection between celestial bodies orbiting the skies and the life forms on earth. Nowhere does Maitreya's question imply any kind of control of planets over terrestrial affairs and human lives. All it says is the connection, the correlation, and correspondence between planets and human affairs. Where then is the question of planets influencing man? A gross misconception being circulated by the anti-astrology brigade. And we must remember, astrology covers not only human affairs, but also all forms of life: insects, birds, fish, animals, viruses, etc. In fact, if you have been through Brihat Jataka, you will find there is an entire chapter named Viyoni Janma Adhyaya, which deals with life forms other than the human. In this brief introduction to the subject, I would like to say a few words on Dr. Raman, founder of ICAS, and this is especially for the benefit of freshers present here. Dr. Raman may be easily described as the father of modern astrology, in keeping with his vision of seeing Jyotisha as an academic subject in the universities. This vision of his is today being fulfilled admirably well by the Indian Council of Astrological Sciences with its classes and workshops. Now, Dr. Raman has often been judged on his brilliant predictions covering a period of over 6 decades, but this is not a fair assessment and can even be deemed doing injustice to what he really achieved in a lifetime of dedication to the cause of Jyotisha. The predictions, of course, were brilliant, but they were not the most important part of Dr. Raman's work. His constant endeavor to make out a case for Jyotisha as a science of immense potential in the face of growing opposition from a technological society, and his relentless efforts to defend astrology from the charge of exploitation were one of the more remarkable facets of Dr. Raman's work. Dr. Raman was the first in nearly 2000 years after the great first century mathematician, astrologer, come astronomer Varahamihira to give a facelift and new orientation to Jyotisha to keep pace with the changing needs of contemporary society. The central core of Dr. Raman's achievements was demystification of astrology. In a very bold and hitherto unread manner, he showed with great clarity and incisiveness its methodology, techniques of data preparation, and models of prediction. And in doing so, he placed astrology through his writings in English on a scientific pedestal on which it was originally conceived and formulated by the great rishis of India. Until then, Jyotisha was treated as a mixture of black magic and tantric practices, which made it look like an antiquated system of divination. Professor Shukla was closely associated with Dr. Raman, as was the late Justice Kapoor, from the early days of the inception of the Indian Council of Astrological Sciences. We must recall with gratitude how Justice Kapoor worked to keep the ICAS in top health for more than a decade. After him, we have Shuklaji now keeping the ICAS flag flying aloft as its national president. A highly placed retired bureaucrat in the Indian government, Shuklaji is basically an intellectual and thinker at heart. He has been researching on the astrological dimensions of the Prasthanatraya, that is the Upanishads, the Bhagavad Gita, and Brahma Sutras, and also the Puranas. He has brought to light hitherto unknown facts of esoteric astrology, setting the trend for an innovative approach to the ancient science of Jyotisha. Dr. Raman would often say that the Srimad Bhagavad Gita and also the Patanjali Yoga Sutras were the best treatises on human psychology that the world had ever produced. In psychology classes in the graduate courses, we are taught that Sigmund Freud is projected as the father of modern astrology. But nowhere do our colleges teach anything about Patanjali Yoga Sutras or the Srimad Bhagavad Gita, which anyone who has gone through them carefully would accept they are the best treatises on human psychology. And we don't know why Sigmund Freud is extolled as the father of modern psychology, when I don't know how many of you know that when Sigmund Freud committed suicide. When does one commit suicide? when one cannot handle one's own mind, right? And he is supposed to be the father of modern psychology. It's unfortunate we have this inferiority complex whenever it comes to our great scriptural treasures. Dr. Raman was an ardent follower of the Srimad Bhagavad Gita, whose tenets he incorporated in his daily life, living its principles in everything he said, did, or thought. In fact, Dr. Raman was a perfect example of the scriptural saying, Manasyekam Vajasyekam Karmanyekam Mahatmanaha. He spoke what he thought and did what he said. There was total concurrence of thought, word, and deed in him, which is the hallmark of a truly great soul. Now it must go to the credit of Dr. Raman for pioneering astrological journalism in the country with the Astrological magazine, which he revived, edited, and produced month after month for over 6 decades. He provided a forum for high-level discussion and exchange of ideas on astrology in its place. Today, we have the good fortune of continuing this journalistic tradition through our magazine Modern Astrology and Pandit Satish Sharma's Jyotish Manthan. There may be other magazines, but I'm not aware of them. Dr. Raman was the first to take the initiative in founding an astrological body at the national level to organize the study of Jyotisha when he played architect to the best astrological body in the world, the Indian Council.
Presentation on the subject. May I request Deputy Controller of Examination Dr. Vani Vinod Garu to honor Madam. And thank you, Madam. We are proud of you, the way you have stood up for the astrologist fraternity, and we learn to stand up like that now.